Rabbi Sai, let's do this. Kiddush Bmakom Seuda. I think it's going to be a little bit of a shorter shiur than usual, but let's get involved. Very negeya, happens all the time. So let's get started. Just a little background that we're going to start, guys, before we get really involved. So we have Kiddush that we make on Leil Shabbos, Friday night, and we have Kiddush that we make Shabbos day. What is the difference between the two Kiddashim? So Kiddush Friday night, that's Kiddush D'Oraisa. And the Kiddush Shabbos day, which is called Kiddush Rabbah, that's only D'Rabbanan. Okay, let's discuss them. So there's a concept of Kiddush Bmakom Seuda. There's a Gemara in Pesachim, Kof Aleph, Amid Aleph, Da'amar Shmuel, and Kiddush Ela Bmakom Seuda. Kiddush needs to be in the place of the Seuda. Kiddush and Seuda need to be in the same place. And there's a bunch of Amoraim that also echo that effect. We need Kiddush and Seuda to be in the same place. And as we'll see, that refers to the same physical place. Also, they should be at the same time. We'll discuss that as we go. Okay. What is the Makar? What is the source that we need Kiddush and Seuda to be together? So the Rashbam, he quotes the source as V'karasi l'Shabbos ha'ineg, which means, what does that mean? V'karasi l'Shabbos, and you call it Shabbos, that's referring to Kiddush. Kiddush is this man of calling the day Shabbos. Ha'ineg is the Seuda. So what does that mean? The Kiddush needs to be with the Oineg, right? You have Kiddush by your Seuda. Kiddush needs to be with the Oineg. You have Kiddush by your Seuda. Your Seuda needs Kiddush. So it's a din in the Seuda. The Seuda needs Kiddush. The Karasa, the Shabbos Oineg. And we have this Kiddush by your Seuda because your Seuda needs the Kiddush. Or, second pshat, and I had a hard time understanding this, but I'll tell you what the Rashbam says. It's a svara. What's a svara? If Kiddush is to be done with yayin, so it's logical it should be done by the meal. Now, according to the first pshat, it's saying it's a din in Seuda. The Seuda needs a Kiddush. The second pshat is saying that the Kiddush needs a Seuda. There's a chiv of Kiddush, and that Kiddush needs a Seuda. Now, at first glance, it sounds like, Yeshiva Shahak. Is the Kiddush need the Seuda needs the Kiddush? But we'll see there's actually are potentially going to be some nafkaminas. But one thing's for sure, Kiddush and Seuda need each other. Fine. Now, that was the Shita of the Rashbam. He quotes two ideas. Derech Hagav, I just want to throw out there, the source that the Rashbam brings, V'karasa Shabbos Oineg, is really a pasuk in Nach, in Shaya. So Tzarechim, we usually don't have Mekayros for dinim from Tanakh. So Tzarechim, if that makes it a mamash a din deraisa, or maybe it's just a smachta, probably it's a smachta. It's probably not a din deraisa if it's coming from Nach. Tzarechim. Okay, so let's keep on going. So the Rosh explains that the concept of Kiddush Bmakom Seuda is, it teaches us to make Kiddush by your Seuda. It's a din in Kiddush. When do you make your Kiddush? You make your Kiddush by the Seuda. You need the Seuda to make the Kiddush work. It's a little bit hard to make these diukim because it's very fine. Rashi says that if you make Kiddush without being sud, we're going to use that word a lot. If you make Kiddush without being satiated, without being sud, without having a Seuda, without being sud, you're not Yotzei Kiddush, i.e., the focus is Kiddush. To make your Kiddush work, we need a Seuda to make your Kiddush work. Okay, that's Shittas Rashi. Now, what exactly do you have to eat to be Yotzei this din? What is it? What foods qualify? Eat what? Sod what? If I have a lot of water, does that count? What exactly do I need? Is apples going to count? Is candy going to count? What's going to count? So is that the Torah? The Torah says you're yoitza this din, or chayim, Reisha and Gimel. What does the Torah say? The Torah says you're yoitza this din. If you have by your Kiddush, you need to have wine, lechem or yayin. You need to have bread or wine. And if you have this meal of bread or wine, you're yoitza. But peiros? No, that you're not yoitza. You're not yoitza with peiros. Peiros is not good enough. You're not yoitza with peiros. So now the question is very simple. Wait a second. You're not yoitza. If you have Kiddush and peiros, you're not yoitza. You need to have bread or wine. Let me ask you a very pashut, fundamental shayla that I had. And the shayla goes like this. What exactly is the case of having peiros without wine? Because surely you were talking about you made Kiddush on wine, and then you had peiros. Rabbi say, you had not just the peiros, you had wine. You made Kiddush on wine. If you made Kiddush on wine, that's the case of being yoitz with wine. So actually, I saw Baruch Hashem, the Bach really comes to answer this question, and the Bach explains that if you had we're talking about being yoitz, being soyed, having wine to be yoitz, your Kiddush Bmakom Seuda. We're talking about when you had a revius of wine, or as he quotes, according to the Ikar Ga'onim, it's a mali lugma plus a revius. Once again, a little background. To be yoitz, how much wine do you need to be yoitz your chiyuv? You need mali lugma. You need you need a cheekful, which is generally assumed to be around half a revius. So let's say if we use a chayna revius is 2.9 ounces. So you have 4.4 ounces, which is not so much. I think these cups are like 6-7 ounces. So just about this is probably 4.4 ounces. Maybe they need a little bit more. Pour a little. Here, pour a little bit in here. There's not so much to have. Probably have this much water. It's 4.4 ounces, and that's enough to be yoitza. If you drink the whole thing, enough to be yoitza Kiddush Bmakom Seuda. Because you need a mali lugma to be yoitza the Kiddush, and you need an additional revius to be yoitza the Seuda part. And then you have Kiddush Bmakom Seuda. Okay, fine. Beseder. Now. So, whereas if you just had a mali lugma, you're yoitza Kiddush, but you're not yoitza Kiddush Bmakom Seuda. Zak the Mechaber, or Chayim Reish Ayin Gimel, he goes like the Torah and says you need to have lechem or yayin, but not peiros. Peiros doesn't work. You need to have lechem or yayin or not peiros. Now, why wine? What sheikh is wine? I understand lechem, that's mamish Seuda, that's soyed. But what sheikhs is wine? So there's a Gemara that says wine is soyed. It's soyed v'sameach. It satiates and makes you happy, but the point of here is the satiates. Wine satiates you, and if it satiates you, so that's the Seuda, Kiddush Bmakom Seuda. Okay, what about grapes? No, grapes doesn't work. We have no makar that grapes works. Grapes is like fruit that doesn't work. We have no makar that grapes does work. But when it comes to wine, that satiates. Grapes, as far as I know, no. So grapes will not count. What about grape juice? Is grape juice good enough? Zakt Rav Elyashiv, Zakt Rav Vosner, no. We have no makar that grape juice satiates, and if we have no makar that grape juice satiates, sorry, not happening. That is not going to work to use grape juice for Kiddush Bmakom Seuda. Zakt Rav Shlomo Zalman, Rav Moshe Feinstein, Rav Nissen Karelitz, Rav Chaim Kanievsky, they say, no, you could use grape juice. It satiates. Grape juice is really wine, just without the alcohol. It's the same thing, just without the alcohol. That's their var. And therefore, if yayin satiates, if yayin is soyed, grape juice as well, and therefore you could be yaitz kiddush with grape juice. And that seems to be, I would guess, the generally accepted opinion. Fine. What about Chamar Medina? Is Chamar Medina going to work? Let's say I'm making Kiddush on whiskey. I'm making Kiddush on beer. I'm making Kiddush on coffee. I'm making Kiddush on orange juice. Whatever it is that we hold as Chamar Medina. Could I just drink a Revius and a Mali Lugma of that and be Yetzer Seuda? So the Mishnah Berurah says, no way. It's two separate things. Just because they count for Kiddush does not in any way, shape, or form prove that they are Sayyid, that they satiate. And Mamela, you cannot use Chamar Medina as your Kiddush Bmakom Seuda. Okay. As the Torah and Shulchan Aruch said, Peiros don't count. But you should know there's opinion. The opinion is Shulti Geburim. The opinion of Shulti Geburim is that Peiros does count. Okay, but could I rely on it? Probably not. It's like the Mishnah Berurah. If somebody's a little sick and for whatever reason they can't eat the mezainis, they don't have access to mezainis, whatever it is, that person could rely on the Shulti Geburim and for their Kiddush Bmakom Seuda have fruit. That's for somebody who's a little sick, but in a normal situation, you cannot have fruit as your Kiddush Bmakom Seuda. Okay. The Pri Megadim says, you know what else you can have? Dates! Dates are satiating. And since dates are satiating, you're Yotze Kiddush Bmakom Seuda with dates like a good Tzvardi. Now, Rav Yashiv says the Psak is not like the Pri Megadim. Why? Because it's not mentioned in any of the Achronim. Nobody mentions it. After the Pri Megadim, nobody mentions this idea of making Kiddush with dates. So Memela, we paskin, you're not allowed to do that. You need lechem or yayin. Now, obviously, something that you should be thinking. By the way, just to be clear, I'm not talking specifically on Friday night or Shabbos day. Right now, so far, everything we discussed till now is talking about both Kiddush at night and Kiddush at day. But I just want to ask you the obvious question, guys. Mizoinus? Could you have Kiddush and have a Raglach? Yeah, I do it every Shabbos. Okay, but, it wasn't in the Torah. It wasn't in the Shulchan Aruch. Where does this come from, this Raglach thing? Zok the Magen Avram with the Pashut Svara. What does the Magen Avram say? The Magen Avram says, if you're allowed to be Kaveya, your Yotze Kiddush Bmakom Seuda with wine, Kol Shekain your Yotze Kiddush Bmakom Seuda with the Chamesh Minei Dagim, with the 5 grains. Because, anything made, any of these Mezaitis products that are made out of the 5 grains, for sure you're Yotze. Why? Because it's obviously more satiating than just wine, and the bracha mezainis is the lashon of satiating. Obviously, it's satiating the chamish minei dagim. Memela, you could make mezainis. Memela, you can have Kiddush Bmakom Seuda with just the chamish minei dagim. Now, the svara of the Magen Avram seems very logical. I agree. It seems very clear. It seems to be pashut that you should be able to have chamesh minei dagim. If wine works, for sure Raglach work. I agree with that in Sfar. The problem is the absence and the fact that the Torah and the Shulchan Aruch both didn't bring down chamesh minei dagim. What's going on? Why wasn't it there? Something's strange. Something's lacking. It seems like it was left out on purpose. However, Mitzad Sheni, there's something strange going on here. Because, it gives 3 options of food. There's a lot more types of food out there than the 3 options. It says, when it comes to bread, yes. Wine, yes. Fruit, no. I don't know. It doesn't mention Mezainis products. Doesn't mention vegetables. I don't know. There's a lot of things that aren't here. It doesn't mention fruit juice. I don't know. What's going on? It's kind of strange that we aren't told the full picture. But Zok the Magen Avram, any type of mezainis counts. Zok Rabbi Akiva Eger. Rabbi Akiva Eger says, based on Rabbeinu Yoina and other Rishonim, you need bread. You're only Yotze Kiddush Bmakom Seuda with bread. No games. Wine doesn't work. And the Gra was machmir for this din, and the Gra said it was machmir to only, brought down a Meisarav, the Gra was machmir to only have Kiddush Bmakom bread. That's the only way to do it. How do we paskin? So the Aruch HaShulchan, the Chai Adam, the Shulchan Aruch HaRav, the Derech HaChaim are paiskim. They would say that we rely on wine. Wine's good enough. You drink enough wine, you can be Yotze Kiddush with that. Even for Friday night, you can be Yotze Kiddush by just drinking enough wine. The Mishnah Berurah brings as the Ikar Halacha that you're allowed to rely on wine, not just bread. You're allowed to rely on wine, and he says it in multiple places, talking about Kiddush in Beis Knesses, and Kiddush in the multiple places where there's not enough wine to go around, whatever. He says there's a couple different sugyas, and he seems to imply you could be Yotze with wine, no problem. In this sugya, in Reish Ayin Gimel Chafei, the Mishnah Berurah says, he brings down the Rav Kiva Eiger of saying that you need bread. And then he says this line, I'm going to just read it after he brings down. So he first says, the first part of the Mishnah Berurah brings down the Magen Avram. And this is not just wine, even if you have mezainis, kol shekain. If you could have mezainis as your Kiddush Bmakom Seuda, if you can have wine as your Kiddush Bmakom Seuda, kol shekain, you could have mezainis. But when it comes to Chmar Medina, that doesn't work. And he brings down the Rav Kiva Eiger that says that you need wine, I'm losing it. He brings down Rav Kiva Eiger that says you need bread. V'al kain nira she'ein lahakol b'zeh el b'makom etchak. And he says, it appears you should only rely on this b'makom etchak. What does he mean you should only rely on this? Does he mean you should only rely on what he just mentioned last, wine? Only rely on wine b'makom etchak? Or does he mean you should only rely on wine or mezainis b'makom etchak? What does he mean? Now, on the one hand, wine is mefurish, and mezainis is a chiddush of the Magen Avram. So you might think that if wine, you only rely on makom etchak, surely mezainis you're only going to rely on b'shas etchak. However, the Meis of the Mishnah Berurah quotes the Magen Avram, and he quotes it as kol shekain. For sure, we rely on mezainis. So what's more pasha to rely on? Mezainis is more pasha to rely on than wine. And what's his line? Only rely on wine b'shas etchak, implying that you can rely on mezainis even when it's not b'shas etchak. So there's two ways of reading the Mishnah Berurah, but the more pashut way of reading the Mishnah Berurah is wine. That's for b'shas etchak, not b'shas etchak, mezainis. Based on this understanding, a regular Shabbos morning, you want to have a Kiddush, you want to have mezainis, that is no problem, you're allowed to rely on this. Is there a chumrah of Kiva Eiger in the Gra? Yes, there's a chumrah. And I know of somebody, a couple of chashuv of people, that they will not have, they'll only have a Kiddush. They'll only have Kiddush with hamoitzi. However, Psak Shulchan Aruch, Psak Mishnah Berurah, I should say, is that mezainis, if you read it the way that I read it, that mezainis is fine for any Shabbos, even if it's not b'shas hadchak. But wine you can only rely on b'shas hadchak. When is it going to be b'shas hadchak that you're going to be stuck relying on wine? You don't have many mezainis? You can usually get your hands on mezainis. When is this b'shas hadchak that we're going to rely on just wine? So the most common time where this happens is Pesach. For us non-gebrux eaters, so on Pesach we don't have chamish minei dagan. We don't have any mezainis to have. It's either, so if it works out to make kiddush and have your amaitzi and have your matzah, great. But you finish davening at 11. Your meal's only starting at 1. You want to eat something. You want a coffee for when you learn. So now that's a makom etchak, that's a b'shas etchak, and you could just have a mali lugma plus a revius of yayin, and that will be good enough. Okay, geschmack. Now, Zakt Rav Yitzchak Elchanan, the Kovner Rav, he explains based on this controversy of do we rely on having the mezainis and the wine generally, or let's work with the mezainis, work with the Mishnah. Do we rely on having that mezainis, or are we machmer for the Rav Akiva Eiger of having only hamaitzi? And he says like this: on Friday night, which is a Kiddush deraisa, this is a chiyuv deraisa of Kiddush Bmakom Seuda. Well, it's not. He doesn't say mefresh. That's a chiyuv deraisa of Kiddush Bmakom Seuda. But by Kiddush, which is deraisa, so then we're machmir for the Rav Akiva Eiger, and we only have Kiddush, then bread, and that's why you probably never saw Kiddush and then mezainis on Friday night. However, by Shabbos day, which Kiddush is only a din derabanan, then we're making like the Iker din of you can have Kiddush and then you can have your mezainis. You don't need bread. Kiddush and then mezainis. We're not machmer for the Rav Akiva Eiger and the Gra, and we'll have Kiddush mezainis Shabbos day. It's only Kiddush, only derabanan. Givaldik, and that's pshat in Minig Yisrael, which seems to be pretty across the board. Zak the Chazon Ish, based on the reasoning of Rabbi Yitzchak Elchanan, the Gadol Hadar of the late 1800s, based on early 1900s, based on his reasoning. So when it comes to Yontif, there's a fundamental difference between Kiddush by Shabbos and Kiddush on Yontif. On Shabbos, Kiddush at night is the Reisa. On Yontif, Kiddush at night is only the Rabbanon. So on Yontif, you could have mezainis after Kiddush. That's ganz fine. When is it applicable? Simchas Torah. Zak the Chazon Ish, Simchas Torah at night. If it's not Shabbos, and it's a weekday, Simchas Torah. So this is like Shabbos day. Just like on Shabbos day, we have Kiddush and the mezainis. So too, by Simchas Torah at night, you can have Kiddush, then mezainis, dance, have a kafas, no problem, geschmack. You don't have to, so you didn't wash. Who cares? This is like Shabbos day, because Kiddush is only derabanan, and many, many places rely on this to make Kiddush at night on Simchas Torah. L'chayra, it seems like a glot cheshbon. Okay, what about rice? Can I make Kiddush and then just have rice? Could we have Kiddush Bmakom sushi? Is Kiddush Bmakom sushi allowed or not allowed? So I heard a shiur from Rav Shragi Kalis, and he brought a very interesting point. He said the Mishnah Berurah, in explaining why is it that rice is not one of the Chamishim Minei Dagan. We paskin, there is some controversy, but we paskin that rice is a mezainis, but it's not one of the Chamishim Minei Dagan, which is strange. If it's not one of the 5 grains, why are we making mezainis? So that Mishnah Berurah explains because it is sayed, he uses the same word. It satiates, and since it satiates, it gets a din mezainis. Zakter of Kalis, so you see that we define rice as something that is sayed, and something that is sayed is the defining factor whether it counts for Kiddush Bmakom Seuda. Therefore, Zakter of Kalis, you're allowed to have Kiddush Bmakom sushi. Kiddush Bmakom sushi will work. Now, I think Rav Kalis' svara is glad. I think it's a beautiful svara. However, my problem is rice is not a nayazach. Rice isn't something new. You know, why did the Shulchan Aruch paskin about electricity? Because the Shulchan Aruch didn't have electricity. That's why the Shulchan Aruch didn't paskin about electricity. But over here, if rice counted, why didn't any of the early Achronim mention it? Why did they make it the Shulchan Aruch? I mean, it's not such a shayla because the Shulchan Aruch only mentions 3 foods. But why did the early Achronim mention anything about rice? Rice is not a new thing. Orez is not a new thing. And I think from the fact that it wasn't mentioned, that leads me to be doubtful to say you could use it for Kiddush Bmakom Seuda. Even though I agree with the svara of Kalis. I'm not arguing with the svara. But the mice is something strange here if it wasn't brought. And therefore I don't think it's so pashut to rely on Kiddush Bmakom sushi. Fine. When you come home from the Kiddush, right? You had Kiddush at shul, you had your ragalach, etc. Do you need to make Kiddush again before starting your Shabbos Day Seuda? So based on the basic psak, the way that we've been going now, once again, you need food for your Kiddush to be Yaitz, din in the Kiddush. At shul, where you Yaitz your Kiddush, Yeah. Okay, so you're Yotze Kiddush Shabbos day. Remember, you don't need new Kiddush for the Seuda. And that for sure is the simple and basic answer in halacha that you do not need to make Kiddush again before your Shabbos day Seuda. Zokt Rabbi Yosef Chaim Zonnefeld. He said, make Kiddush again before your Shabbos day Seuda. Why? What's pshat? Why should you make Kiddush again? You want to be Yotze Kiddush Lefi the Gra. L'maisa, Lefi the Gra, you weren't Yotze Kiddush when you had your Rakalach. The Gra says you need Lechem. And since you weren't Yotze, not telling you don't eat, because not saying you have to be machmir for him and starve yourself and not eat. But now that you're going to start your Seuda, make Kiddush again. So you should at least be Yotze Kiddush Bmakom Seuda Lefi the Gra. And the Meister of Moshe Sternbach goes like this as well. Rav Shlomo Zalman says as well you should make Kiddush right before the Seuda. He has a little bit of a different reasoning. You want to give chashivas to the Seuda of Shabbos day. L'maisa, if you have your Shabbos Seuda without making some form of Kiddush beforehand, it's going to look like a regular day meal. It's not going to look special. Therefore, it's not an Iker Din. Iker Din Kiddush, it's not required. However, as a chumrah, it's a beautiful practice to make that Kiddush, make that Bayer Priya Gofen on wine. Whether we even call it Kiddush or not Kiddush, I'm not sure. But make that Bayer Priya Gofen on wine before your Shabbos day meal to give chashivas to the Shabbos day meal. Rav Moshe Feinstein, he had a totally different approach on the whole sugya. He said you should make Kiddush again before the Seuda. Why? Because the Seuda needs Kiddush. He said the Seuda, the Shabbos day Seuda, needs a Kiddush with it. So he was saying that the Iker is the Seuda. The Kiddush is serving the Seuda. And the Seuda needs Kiddush. So therefore, make Kiddush to serve the Seuda. And he said also, for example, we're talking about Pesach, you can make Kiddush and have your shehakal cookies. Why? Because, once again, you need your Kiddush to eat the shehakal cookies, because you can't eat the shehakal cookies without Kiddush. Are you Yotze Kiddush Bmakom Seuda? No, because it's not a Seuda. Once again, so you have your Seuda later, you're going to need Kiddush. So you have Kiddush now, you'll be able to eat a little bit. And are you allowed to do this? Yes. Because, you're not used to the Kiddush Bmakom Seuda, so what? But your Seuda is still going to need Kiddush. So he seems to go with the first side in that Rashbam before, that the Kiddush is there to serve the Seuda. Your Seuda will need Kiddush. But you don't need mezainis to make your Kiddush, to make your agafen on the grape juice or wine. You don't need mezainis. And you can do it with the shehakal as well. It's not a problem. So that's very interesting. That's Rav Moshe Feinstein, which is going against the grain, against the general sheets of the Poskim. But we saw there's various reasons to make a second Kiddush when you get home, to make Kiddush before your Seuda. But these are all Metoyers Chumrah. Metoyers Ikar Din, one does not have to make Kiddush again when starting their Seuda. And thank you for joining me. Thank you for listening. At one point that I'm just going to throw in there that I forgot, there's a time proximity as well. Kiddush needs to be Bmakom Seuda, so that means after you make Kiddush, right away you need to start your Seuda. What is right away is very not mefurish in the Poskim. What is right away? It seems to be, you certainly can't plan on making Kiddush and you have your Seuda in 20 minutes. That's not cool. And you should just make your Kiddush right before you're ready to start your Seuda. So if you have a couple of setting up things in the Seuda last minute, I guess that's okay because everything's going to be Seuda based. But don't make Kiddush well before your Seuda, because that is a problem. It seems a minute or two, whatever, you're being Oisik Binyoni Seuda, you get away with that. But in general, you need your Kiddush right before your Seuda. And therefore, when you make Kiddush right away, have your mezainis. Don't schmooze for 10 minutes and then go have your mezainis. That is a problem that does not count. Thank you for listening.